Today, we're going to talk about a really tragic day, July 21st, 2025. It's the day a routine training flight suddenly became a national catastrophe, right over the skies of Dhaka.
36. That's the number. The number of people who lost their lives in this single awful event. It's the final, heartbreaking toll of a day that really scarred a nation and brought up some very tough questions about safety and responsibility.
So let's get into what happened, and it's just horrific. A Bangladesh Air Force training jet crashed, but not in some empty field. It came down directly on top of a school filled with students and teachers, right in the middle of a normal day.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The date was July 21st, 2025. The place was the Milestone School and College in Uttara, which is a really crowded northern part of Dhaka. The aircraft involved was a Chinese-made Chengdu F-7 BJI jet flown by the Bangladesh Air Force, and it all happened just moments after takeoff.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just an instantaneous event. In those terrifying few moments between the plane leaving the runway and hitting the school, a whole story played out. A story of a machine failing and a pilot desperately trying to do the impossible.
It didn't take investigators long to figure out the cause. It was a critical mechanical failure. Almost right after getting into the air, the plane just became completely unresponsive. So, you have to understand, this wasn't about pilot error. The machine itself just, well, it catastrophically failed.
And this is where the human element of the tragedy just hits you so hard. The pilot, a man named Flight Lieutenant Mohammed Tukir Islam, he realized he'd lost control. He knew what was coming. And in his very last moments, he was fighting to guide that doomed jet away from the dense neighborhoods below, trying to minimize the inevitable loss of life.
When you look at the final numbers, the sheer scale of it is just staggering. The final count was 36 dead. That's 35 people on the ground and the pilot, and a staggering 172 injuries. All of that from one single mechanical failure. It's just devastating.
You can only imagine the chaos on the ground. The impact was instant and overwhelming, plunging the entire community, and really the whole nation, into a state of shock and mourning.
And in that initial chaos, it was almost impossible to get a clear picture of how bad things were. The numbers just kept climbing. First, reports were saying 19 dead. Then, as rescue operations continued, that number jumped to 31. And then, it finally settled at that grim final toll of 36. Every update just brought a fresh wave of grief.
The response on the ground was, well, it was a mix of sheer desperation and incredible dedication. There weren't enough ambulances, so regular people were using rickshaws to ferry the injured to hospitals. You can imagine the scene at the burn units. They were just completely overwhelmed. The government declared a national day of mourning and launched an investigation, even calling in Chinese experts to help figure it all out.
Which brings us to the crucial question at the heart of this tragedy. It's not just what happened, but why. Why did a military aircraft just fall out of the sky? And to understand that why, you really have to look at the aircraft itself, the Chengdu F-7, and its, let's say, controversial history. So this F-7 jet, it's not exactly a modern design. It's a Chinese-made version of the old Soviet MiG-21. We're talking about an airframe that was originally designed way back in the 1950s. Now, it's been updated over the years, for sure, but the fundamental design is decades old. And this wasn't some big secret. The F-7 family of aircraft has been linked to safety concerns for a long time, specifically because of its aging airframe and what experts have called limited modernization. So this crash, tragically, didn't happen in a vacuum.
The scale of this disaster makes it one of the deadliest aviation accidents in Bangladesh's recent memory. It's a tragic benchmark that's going to be remembered for a very, very long time.
And that leaves us with a final, really unsettling question. A military's job is to protect its citizens. But when its own equipment is plagued by safety concerns, at what point does that hardware stop being a shield and start becoming a threat to the very people it's supposed to defend?